First talk this morning is entitled A Response to Questions of Our Age, and this has been given by Dr. William Newton in place of Dr. Waldstein, who unfortunately was not able to join us. So I'd just like to introduce Dr. William Newton and the topic that he will be speaking on this morning. Dr. William Newton is Assistant Professor of Pastoral Theology at the International Theological Institute in Gaming, Austria. He has recently completed his PhD in Theological Anthropology from the John Paul II Institute for Marriage and Family in Melbourne, Australia. Since 2007, he has been a tutor for students on the Bachelor of Arts Divinity programme at the Maryvale Institute in Birmingham. Before moving from England to Austria, he and his wife spent almost 7 years working for various pro-life charities and political organisations in the UK. In 2000, the UK general elections, he stood as a parliamentary candidate for a pro-life political party. He currently lives in Gaming, Austria, with his wife and 5 children, who are also here with us this weekend. And Dr. Newton this morning will speak on Chapter 2 of Part 1 of the Theology of the Body later on, after he has spoken on the questions of our age, which is examining scientific knowledge and power over nature that are examined in relation to the Church's proclamation of the dignity of the human person and the nature of true human progress. So I'd like to invite Dr. William Newton to join us here to deliver the talk.
Thank you. Perhaps we could just start with a prayer, because that makes me feel at home, and it'll probably be good for you as well. Okay, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Okay, good morning. So Isaac Newton famously said that the reason he saw so far was because he stood on the shoulder of giants. Now, I don't claim any penetrating insights to the degree that Isaac Newton had in science into the theology of the body, but I can also claim to have, like my namesake, to have stood for a short time on the shoulder of a giant. And by that I wish to pay honor to Dr. Waldstein, who in the area of theology of the body is a kind of giant, I guess. And I had for many years in Garmin the privilege to be first of all a student of his and then a colleague of his. Now, of course, sadly, he can't be with us today, though anyone who knows him is probably suspecting to bump into him round every corner they go round in Maynooth. I certainly am. And so, with fear and trembling, I dare to step into his shoes, which, theologically speaking, I would have to admit are a couple sizes too big for me. But I will manfully press on. Okay, the task assigned to me is to prepare the stage for the other talks. And they will explore in some detail the intricacies of the theology of the body. And indeed, I think the novelty of this symposium is that it seeks to work systematically through the theology of the body, making it better known in a certain way, creating a commentary on it, which I think is what we need to start doing on the theology of the body. And to build the stage, it seems to me I must address really one crucial question. And this question is, why did John Paul II write the theology of the body? I wonder if we just take 10 seconds for you to think yourselves, what would be your answer to that question? I think another way to express this same question is this: what are the questions of our age that he sought to address when he wrote the theology of the body? I think answering this question is very important. Only when we understand the precise aim of a theological work can we really hope to understand it. And the theology of the body is a difficult work. I think it's true to anyone who's read it that the theology of the body, the arguments are sometimes complex, and the manner of arguing is sometimes convoluted. So without clarity on the destination, a reader will tend to feel all at sea, disorientated, and tempted to give up. Because to him, the theology of the body can start to appear as a jumble of very interesting but somehow loosely connected ideas. Well, that's my experience. None of you, maybe you didn't have that experience, but I think I'm probably not alone in that. So we need to have clarity about the overall aim of the work. And then, despite the complexity which is present in the theology of the body, I think we start to see the real incisive logic that makes up the chapters and how they're all united to each other in regard to a single aim. So the fundamental question before us, before me, is why did John Paul II write the theology of the body? Now, at the end, the last chapter, the end of the last catechesis of the first chapter of the theology of the body, John Paul II makes a statement which I think is very helpful. Actually, that catechesis and the last catechesis of the whole work are the most helpful in giving us a guide to what he's up to. In the last catechesis of the first chapter, noting that the answers to the most fundamental truths about men and women come from Christ, he says this. He says, without this answer from Christ, one cannot build a theological anthropology, and in its context, a theology of the body, from which also the full Christian vision of marriage and family originates. So, his aim then is not first of all to write a systematic theology of the body. I hope that's not heresy to anyone. Indeed, in the final catechesis, he excludes that as his aim, because he notes that there are certain things that would need to be part of a systematic theology of the body, which he doesn't address in that work, namely death and suffering. So I think we can say rather the focus is on the construction of a Christian anthropology, and on the basis of this, a presentation of the Christian vision of marriage. And within this presentation of the Christian vision of marriage, there is a specific goal of addressing the rather thorny question of conjugal morality. When I use the word conjugal, I'm pointing to the sexual relationships between spouses. Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is made clear in the final catechesis, when the Holy Father points out that it is a commentary on Humanae Vitae which is driving the whole work. Now, the commentary on Humanae Vitae only makes up 15 of the 133 catechesis, but it's clear from what he says in the final catechesis, 133, that the whole work is structured and determined in regard to making this commentary. And elsewhere we see him actually say that he considers the theology of the body as a rereading of Humanae Vitae. And perhaps we can sense something of the satisfaction or the vindication he must have felt in being able to do that, because we know that he was on the Birth Control Commission, which has been started by John the 23rd and continued by Paul the 6th, though he was never able to attend it. And that commission, perhaps you know, was to make some recommendations about the Church's teaching on contraception. And I think that we can sense that he saw that Providence had given him the possibility to readdress what had gone wrong after that in regard to, I think, the poor and, in a way, manner of betrayal in which Paul VI had been treated. So, anyway, so this, I think, then has to be our focus, that he's focusing down on a commentary on Humanae Vitae. So in summary then, I think we have before us three questions of our age which theology of the body wants to address. And these are the questions of marriage, the question of man, and in the context of Humanae Vitae, the question of the body. So my intention now is to consider each of these in a little more detail. I think that if we look at the question of marriage, the theology of the body must be seen in the context of John Paul II's early pontificate, in which the theme of marriage and family was dominant. So along with these 4 years of general audience, in the first 5 years of his pontificate, he put down 6 other landmarks in regard to marriage and family. So first of all, we had the Synod of 1980. Synod of Bishops was called to discuss marriage and family. Then we have Familias Consortio, the first apostolic exhortation of his pontificate. We have the creation of the Pontifical Council for the Family in 1981, followed by the founding of the John Paul II's Institutes for Studying Marriage and Family in 1981. And then the reordering of the canon law in the early 80s also made a significant reordering of the canon law and representation of the canon law of marriage and family. So we see at the beginning of his pontificate a real concern for this. And I think in doing this, we have to see that he is implementing the Second Vatican Council, because you probably know in the pastoral constitution on the church in the modern world, Gaudium et Spes, that the second part of that document is dedicated to current questions of our age, or questions of particular importance for our age. And the first question it addresses is the question of marriage and family. So as a father of the council, and we know he had a strong involvement in Gaudium et Spes, he is, as it were, picking up where the council had left off. So we can see again proof of this if we look at the final catechesis, Catechesis 133, because in that he makes it clear that the context of these catechesis is the Synod of Bishops, which he'd called. He had the choice on what it should be called to discuss, and he said the first one will be on marriage and family life. And it's kind of sandwiched, as it were, by his talks also of theology of the body, as it were, surround his promulgation of Familias Consortio. And so I think that if we have to have a document, I will mention a few documents we should have in our back pockets when we read theology of the body. Certainly one of them we should have is Familias Consortio, because he points specifically to this in the final catechesis. And in there I think we get maybe a clearer or more succinct expression of the concern he had. Why is he now focusing these 4 years on marriage and family as a central question of our age? And one of the key quotes from Familias Consortio, as you probably know, is that the future of humanity passes by way of the family. You know, it's almost like a banner of that document. But, maybe less clearly known, he also makes it clear that the future of the people of God, the divine society, which is the church, also passes by way of the family. Just as a human society is built up by families, this divine society is also built up from families. And so it's a critical question for the health not just of society but of the church, this question of family life. Now, understood as the mystical body of Christ, we know that the church has perennial vitality from its head. The church is never going to just disintegrate like a human society could. But that is not to say that God doesn't want his mission, which is assigned to the church, to be realized in a serious way through the family. So this is, I think, a reason for his focus down on the family. And I think it's easy to miss the prophetic edge that there is in this concern for the family. The theology of the body, we know, is written for the most part in the middle of the 70s, even if it's delivered at the beginning of the 80s. And looking back from 2009, it's clear that the question of family is a huge issue for the future of the church and for the future of society. Maybe it wasn't so clear back then. So it's part of his prophetic gift, I think, that he made this, the beginning of his pontificate, a certain concern. To take Ireland, which it by no means is the worst situation in Europe, in the 30 years that have that have gone by since the last catechesis was delivered, the number of separated or divorced persons has increased fivefold. And of course we now enter into the realm of all other suggestions about the future of marriage and other unions of same-sex unions, which weren't even on the agenda then. But I think this concern at the beginning of his pontificate is part of his prophetic charism. I think there's another statement from the Council, because John Paul II is clearly a man of the Council, which is important in this regard, and that would be perhaps the most famous quote from the Second Vatican Council, this time from the dogmatic constitution on the Church, Lumen Gentium, and the so-called universal call to holiness. It states that it is evident to everyone that all the faithful of Christ, of whatever rank and status, are called to the fullness of the Christian life and to perfection in charity. Now, this universal call to holiness is clearly a hallmark of the pontificate of John Paul II. In what I would say is the must-be-read apostolic letter Tertio Millennio Inuente, it's compulsory for all Catholics to read that, I believe, because there he sets out the agenda for the third millennium. Nobody else on earth could set out the agenda for the third millennium, apart from John Paul II. No one would dare. But in there, he makes the training in holiness as the high point of the agenda. This is the agenda for the third millennium. He says that the time has come to re-propose wholeheartedly to everyone the high standard of ordinary Christian living. The whole life of the Christian community and of Christian families must lead in this direction. So if you ever wondered what your parish mission statement should be, it's there.